Good evening and welcome to Gibson's Bookstore Remote. Thank you for joining us this evening. I am very pleased to welcome two New England poets joining us tonight, Carol Westberg and Sue Burton. These two will be reading their poems tonight. If you have questions that you would like to ask, please do pop them into the chat sidebar or the Q&A. We will be answering them at the end of the event. Feel free to pop them in as you think of it. I will be keeping an eye on that. And again, make sure that you check your chat settings so that it's set to everyone so that everybody can see what you're saying and people can answer you, chat back and forth with you. I do love to watch a good chat sidebar, very active during an event. It's almost like watching two conversations happening at once. We are going to start tonight with Sue Burton, but first, ladies, hello.
Hello.
Hello. The Queen's wave.
So good to see you. Both of the books are available from Gibson's Bookstore. We are very happy to ship or offer in-store shopping, browsing, curbside pickup, whichever. But tonight we are beginning with Sue Burton. Sue D. Burton is her collections include the book-length poem Little Steel and Box, selected by Diane Seuss for the 2 Sylvia's Press Poetry Prize. Box was awarded silver in the 2018 Forward Indies Poetry Book of the Year and was a finalist for the 2019 Vermont Book Award. Congratulations. Her prose sonnet sequence Box Set, which she will be reading today, won 4th Genre's Steinberg Prize. Sections from it appear in the anthology edited by Annie Finch, Choice Words, Writers on Abortion. Sue apprenticeship trained as a physician assistant at the Vermont Women's Health Center and as a poet at Vermont College. She lives in Burlington, Vermont. Sue, welcome. Please delight us with your verse tonight.
Thank you. Thank you, Elizabeth. You've been great to work with, and thank you to Gibson's. It's an independent bookstore. We need more of them. That's great. And thanks to Carol for inviting me to read with her for her launch of her stunning new book, Icelands. So I'm going to read from my collection, Box. And the box refers to the box that the woman who is sawn in half is in. And actually, there are 2 women in the box. One in the front of the box and the other in the back of the box at the other end, but actually underneath the box. Are you following this? So the woman in the front pulls her knees in and the woman underneath pokes her feet out the end. So they each are in their own little section during the sawing. I demonstrate, but I'm sort of limited on Zoom. So. The House of Illusion. She'd say, someday you'll go on without me. She worked the back of the box from underneath where the saw couldn't reach. Her name was Ruby. We had nothing in common but our long, skinny feet. She was down there in the dark like Nijinsky's fawn in a clean cream-colored bodysuit, little goat horns that nobody could see, bobby pinned in hair that nobody could see, red streaked and kinked. And of course, the silver shoes, same size as mine, at the end of the box that everybody could see. She was always talking down there. I'm inside Nijinsky's dead brain. She'd get louder when Jack started with the saw. Inside the cloven soul, the whole box thumping like a seance, Jack sawing away. Shut her the hell up. But how? That voice splitting me like a headache. It got so I didn't know who I was. She was, I don't know, a sprite, just like a man dressed as a goat. She'd say, it's magic. And I'd think, I'm not real either, up here now with my own skinny feet out the end of a box and a lipstick smile like the all-American prom queen. After the show, she'd perch on the bar in her fawn leotard and hold up her drink. Always something tall and purple or blue with maraschinos and crushed ice. And she'd say, it's art. So there are other boxes in the book, coffins, Pandora's box. The sonnet often gets compared to a box, 14 lines that look sort of boxy on the page. What I'm going to read next is a sonnet sequence called A Heroic Crown. A heroic crown is made up of 14 sonnets that are linked by repeating the last line of one sonnet as the first line of the next. Then a final 15th sonnet is made up of all the first lines of the preceding 14. My heroic crown is composed of 14-line prose poems. This sequence, called box set, is in remembrance of my great aunt Nettie Bope, who died in 1902 of an illegal abortion in Columbus, Ohio. I was drawn to Nettie's story because, well, it was a family secret. I'd been working at a women's health center for about 10 years when my mother happened to mention it. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" I said. "Oh, it was a scandal," my mother said, "in all the papers, and I've told you everything I know." So I started researching through interlibrary loan. I spent months hunched in front of the Burlington, Vermont Public Library microfilm machine, scrolling through Ohio newspapers from 1902, 1903. I first discovered a newspaper account that had described Nettie as having been taken to the place of a Mrs. Beatty in a delicate condition. I assumed that Mrs. Beatty had performed the abortion. I discovered a much more complicated story, front page headlines in the Columbus Daily Press week after week. It seems timely to read box set today, 2 days before the 49th anniversary, and perhaps the last, of Roe versus Wade. Box set. For my great aunt Antoinette Nettie Bope, 1880-1902. 1. Nettie in a pine box. The family Bible says died young, erased, then written in again. A scandal, my mother says, botched, back alley, in all the papers. My mother's name is Moo. He took advantage, got her drunk. My great-grandma Nettie's mother, Susan, I'm named for her, saw a bell of fire in Nettie's shoes left out on the landing. "Why don't you go back to teaching?" Names, begottens, a line of heroes toting muskets, bugles, our ticket to the DAR. Proper. Nettie's name erased. Who wrote it back? Moo says, our people didn't slight. Men's names, doing muskety things. No family tree for Antoinette. Antoinette Nettie Bope, Frenchified, Ohio. My mother's name is Moo. She told me everything she knows. My name is Sooty. Sooty, don't brood. No one likes a gloomy puss. Nettie has a lovely tombstone down in Thurston. 2. Lovely tombstone down in Thurston. After the doctors and their implements, spoons bent in different directions to suit the operation. After weeks convalescing at Mrs. Beatty's, not a place the average reputable physician would think of sending a patient. After Nettie's father was finally notified, called in Dr. Klaus, who moved Nettie to Grant Hospital, as I considered that a more respectable place to die, who did last-ditch surgery. Pointless, but he saw something. Next day, Nettie in her coffin at the Columbus train station. Next train, Thurston. But Klaus rushing to the station, hauling her back to the hospital, hell-bent on doing an autopsy. Why? Daily Press, front page, June 1, 1902. Mysterious circumstances surround girl's death. Klaus and his autopsy. Opened her up, opened Pandora's box. Is it true Nettie wasn't pregnant? 3. Is it true Nettie wasn't pregnant? But she thought she was. Did she try one of those mail order concoctions? The parsley seed cure? Did it screw up her hormones? Everybody took them. Ads in church bulletins for blocked menses. But she was seen by doctors, Hoskinson and Cooks. Did they even know how to do a pelvic exam? They inserted instruments, bent spoons, pen holders, wire attached, but can't repeat. 1968, Baltimore, ex waiting in a bar while I go to the doctor's to get a rabbit test, to get a phone number so somebody could drive me someplace in Pennsylvania blindfolded. Ex had a few beers by the time I got back to the bar. The doctor's waiting room was standing room only, thick with smoke. 4, standing room only, thick. I was 24. Nettie was almost 22. I found her, loved her, made her into myself. For years, I had only one newspaper clipping. It is said the girl was taken to the place of a Mrs. Beatty on South Pearl Alley some time ago, and it was claimed she was in a delicate condition at the time. Beatty, no first name. Licensed midwife, whatever that meant in 1902. But in 1902, university-trained doctors, regular doctors, were on a crusade to license themselves, to squeeze out the competition. The irregulars, like Mrs. Beatty, who diluted the profession. Like me in 1976, apprenticeship trained at a women's health center. For years, I had only one clipping and thought Mrs. Beatty was the abortionist. Nothing in the paper about doctors. You don't do abortions, do you, Sue? Moo asked me once. 5. No one should do abortions, said the regular doctors, except themselves. Hospital boards, yes, no, checks, boxes. Regulars will regulate, begottens. Though concerns re preserving the stock. Who is this Antoinette Vope, Frenchified, farmer's daughter, grocery clerk, convalescing for weeks? Who is the author of her ruin? Cy Stewart, regular docs? Sooty don't brood. A student at Ohio State, Cy Stewart, quote, claimed to know a great deal, which he could tell about the girl if the press would promise not to use his name. But as he intimated, it was reflections on the girl's character rather than facts in connection with his case at hand. He was informed his story was not wanted. My white dress Emily Dickinson Nettie, who was hardworking and held in high esteem. Doctors and their boxes. They should have let the midwives keep the work. 6. Cooks told Dr. Klaus he needed the work. He had 4 children, cried like a child, said he took the case because he needed money to buy food. Touching appeal, but I could not promise Monday. Monday, he asked me again to protect him. At that time, however, he thought he could not be prosecuted for the reason the girl was not gravid. Dr. Charles F. Cooks, his colleague, Dr. Asa E. Hoskinson, Sterling College graduates, first names, middle initials, regular doctors needing work. Could they tell the difference between a 16-week and a non-pregnant uterus? The instruments introduced to procure the abortion had perforated the intestines and in all probability had pierced the liver. At Mrs. Beatty's, they treated the inflamed parts with water. No Woundworth, no Keats. It's not safe, Moo says. Those kooks picketing your place. 7, those kooks picketing. Jay Kopp from Swanton, one of our regulars, later went down to Buffalo and shot Dr. Barnett Schleppian. Hoskinen's cooks are going to trial. Attempted abortion. Is the woman seeking an abortion the victim of a crime or an accomplice? The Daily Press calls Nettie the victim of an attempt at abortion, an unfortunate young woman, fear-stricken and misguided. The principals in the crime are the abortionist and the sexual partner. Antoinette is dead and someone is responsible. Who that is, it must be determined by the authorities. Dr. Hoskinson said the girl may have caused her own death. Nettie, on her deathbed, identified Cooks, Hoskinson, her seducer, Cy Stewart, and Mrs. Beatty. But it was Nettie's brother, Ed, who'd hired the doctors. 8. Day after the autopsy, brother Ed fell back into a faint when Dr. Klaus told him Nettie hadn't been pregnant and that Ed was cleared. Ed was 26. What gave Klaus the authority to clear him? Did Klaus want to protect him? Was Klaus protecting himself? Called in by the family, guilty by association? The September 1902 journal, the AMA, advised physicians refuse all responsibility for the patient unless a confession exonerating you from any connection to the crime is given. What if Nettie had been pregnant? What if Klaus said she wasn't pregnant to clear himself? I didn't take the blindfolded drive in 1968. I managed to get a committee-approved abortion at Johns Hopkins Hospital. I was a Hopkins grad. One of those Hopkins perks? Hoskins said at the trial, he assured the girl she was entertaining fears and advised her to go home. 9. Not to worry and go home. Klaus in his Pandora's box. Klaus, who wanted the whole truth, darling of the press. Truth to what end? Septic condition so pronounced it was of no avail. My mother has 2 stories. Nettie and my grandmother, sisters a year apart. Nettie, their father's favorite. Nettie with a new red dress. Nanny, a new blue dress. This is what Nanny told my mother. Why this? Why this passed down? Nettie does something bad. Their father makes them trade dresses. Second story, Nettie's been bad and they have to trade dolls. First, Hoskinson and Cooks positively deny all knowledge of the girl or her ailment. Then they admit to inserting instruments, then beg for protection. Then lo, the story changes. Nettie's not gravid and they told her to go home. Hope for Hoskinson and Cooks. Nettie alone in her room in her white dress. 10. Nettie all alone in a room, convalescing at Mrs. Beatty's. Why wasn't malpractice on trial, not abortion? Even the Ohio State Board of Medical Registration revoked the licenses of Hoskinson and Cooks October 9, 1902, that the operation amounted to butchery. Septic, so pronounced. The doctor who taught me to do abortions at the Women's Health Center said the big New York hospitals where she trained had a 25-bed ward for patients with infections from illegal abortions. By 1971, when the New York legalized abortion, it was empty. After the surgery of no avail at Grand Hospital, right before she died, Nettie told Klaus, December 19 was the only time in my life. Cy Stewart skipped town before the trial. Nettie died not knowing she wasn't pregnant. 11. Nettie died not knowing. Tell me it was a blessing. Sooty. How old was Mrs. Beatty? Was she motherly? Early on, she'd said, I try to do all the good and as little harm as I can, but I always get the worst. Nettie's own mother put a tiny pill box on her head, shut herself up in the parlor. Her father said, no more girls will leave the farm. Now my mother at 83, 30 years older than Nettie's aged father when he was summoned to Columbus, standing in the graveyard down at Thurston, her hair so white, wearing the white wool coat she bought for my wedding years ago, her black patent leather pocketbook enormous slung over one arm. You don't have to lug around that purse, I called to her. It'll be perfectly safe in the car. She shakes her head and takes hold of the clasp with both hands. The Bopes are right here, she says. 12. Right here, Moo says again, clasping the Bope family headstone, frowning slightly. Her other grandparents were her favorites. The Bopes were a nervous bunch, she says, and the sisters fought like barn cats, but they were loyal to each other. Nettie's tombstone, a few feet downslope from her parents' graves, faces away from the churchyard in the direction of the old farm. A polished granite square wreathed with scraggly brown grass. Antoinette, daughter of W.W. and S.L. Bope, July 7, 1880, May 30th, 1902. It's a beautiful marker, Moose says. Now, do you feel better? Back in the car, she looks tired, small. It's starting to drizzle. As we turn north from the cemetery out onto the main road, she looks over her shoulder and sighs. She fumbles in her purse for her compact. Didn't you ever want children? 13. Didn't you want children? Nettie in a white dress. Not a wedding dress. No cradle. Nettie's mother, Susan, had 12 children. My grandmother was mama to the younger girls, killed and dressed a chicken when she gave up her blue and her. No more girls will leave the farm. Nettie downslope. Klaus wanted the whole truth. Sooty wanted the truth too. Missed. I almost missed it. after months poring over front page headlines. The trial, fast forward, rewind, buried on page 7. Columbus Daily Press, just the facts, ma'am. March 14, 1903, Dr. Hoskinson not guilty. Criminal jury rendered verdict. Indictment against Dr. Cook's knowledge. 14, verdict, not guilty. Indictment knowledge. They dug the grave. Amen. They sang or did not sing the Christian hymns. Who will carry me over the river? Amen. They did not preach justice. They did not preach truth. They shoveled red dirt into the hole. Cy Stewart, the author of Nettie's Ruin. Back to town, a high estate. Nettie's brother. What good to publish the facts? Facts weren't going to bring his sister back. But what were they thinking in the jury box? Nettie in a pine box, died young. 15, erased. Nettie died not guilty. They dug the grave. Thank you. So Elizabeth, I'll hand it back to you.
Thank you very much, Sue. Thank you. Reminder that box is available from Gibson's Bookstore. I will put the link into the chat sidebar. Our next poet, Carol Westberg. Carol Westberg's Terra Infirma was a finalist for the 2014 Tampa Review Prize. Slipstream was a finalist for the 2011 New Hampshire's Literary Award for Outstanding Book of Poetry. Tyranny of Dreams was chosen for the New Hampshire Poet Laureate's Poet Showcase. Her work has appeared in journals such as Prairie Schooner, Hunger Mountain, Valparaiso Poetry Review, and Calyx. She's read in the Canaan Meeting House Reading Series and at Bookstock, among other venues. Carol earned a BA from Duke, an MA from Stanford, and an MFA in poetry at Vermont College. She lives in Hanover, New Hampshire with her husband. Carol, thank you for sharing your poems with us.
Well, thank you so much. I'm just, Elizabeth, very, very happy to be here. I appreciate Gibson's for doing so much to bring all kinds of poetry and other things to the world. There's nothing quite like having your local bookstore. So thank you. And Sue, that was a wonderful reading. Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to read from Iceland, my latest collection, and I love the artwork on the cover that Leah Rothstein did. So I guess we'll just leap right in. Edible, inedible. In Reykjavik, I sip birch bark tea, eat spotted catfish wrapped in moss. The wide mind takes it all in. The mouth swallows black lava salt and parts of creatures that once had scales, hooves, wings. Will I eat carrot, but not cow? Sheep, not dog? Pig, not horse? Pheasant, not cormorant? Or puffin, charming thieves with parrot beaks who don't hunt their own food, but steal other birds' prey? Humpbacks take in schooling fish, and I taste minke whale disguised in lime sauce on a white plate. God sees everything I do, being with me, being in, consuming what I consume. Fish eyes stare up at us, make a face on a plate. Unnumbered, the eyes of God. So, Crystal, Indigo Night. My mother is hoping to die soon, turns on her side under a supermoon on the wane, mumbles something about climbing the mountain barefoot, whispers, "Work hard, and you will have worked hard." The sky opens and rain cascades down here, but not on the parched land to the south, burning for days now. "Please take our rain. We're drowning and you're dying of thirst." My mother survives for a time, increasing in ease with silence. One morning, I'll wake to a world diminished without her prophecy, its still center ablaze. Ghost light. This starts with an epigraph. "It is only the light that we keep feeling a need to account for." And that's from The Marfa Lights by W.S. Merwin, who we miss. I've never seen the Marfa Lights, but have driven past the outpost of dreams, stopped at sunset to train my eyes on the horizon toward the Chanatis, hoping to see pulsing green or blood red orbs rise above yucca and desert scrub, unexplained. I've never seen the mystery lights said to linger or streak across Mitchell Flat, but things I can't see happen every day, whether I'm there or not when the lyre bird sings continents away. Inquiring, I live forward, some mysteries intact. I've never seen the ghost lights, but invite my brother's ghost to my side. Again, I remember how too much light died after his bike crashed. Gaze out to the horizon with soft eyes past Ocotillo, rock nettle, and dormant desert seeds. I've never seen such a sunrise, opening to the invisible, whatever is visible beneath the sand. Above the terrace, doves coo, signals wink on, off, nearer, farther, receding from the horizon. The morning sky, a wild code of stars. Road to nowhere. The road to nowhere levitates, undulates, sweats and seethes in summer. In winter, buckles, cracks, swallows unsuspecting cars in potholes grown huge. Does macadam have no feelings for the wind, sun and moon and stars? Trucks rumble along its surface, pulling woolly horses and cargo unseen. Priests and thieves, immigrants and citizens, none with proper documents for this life or the next. Each passenger parts the air, stirs up dust, blind to a mirage of willows genuflecting, reflected in a stream that can't hear our sighs. Kansas loves its open spaces bordering Oklahoma, boundaries unmarked. Roads striking out across no one's land, not your land, not my land. The road to nowhere leads past sun-bleached bones, singing danger, wonder, always wide surprise at the end. Bitter house. In my fear, I'll end up bitter as chicory and alone, alone, wind whipping long grasses in the dunes. With my fear, I'll end up like the husband I left in the wake of my faithlessness. Both of us wandering a wilderness of concrete streets. No one to go home to. No one to talk to in the swaddling dark. Past my fear, I'll end up bitter as burdock root, like a child beaten with her father's studded belt, grown scarred and angry, leaving home afraid of no ghost more than her father, living alone. I'm not alone in my fear. I'll end up like my ex, who fears his next wife will leave him, and she does. I've grown wary of acrid greens. I brew bitter nail tea, serve kiwi and pepitas as antidotes to soothe my two grown daughters, thin as reeds, and not alone in their fear. They'll end up on some windswept coast, scudding along like sea foam, left quivering on damp sand. Screened in porch. From her small rocker, white wicker, a round-faced child watches the drive. Her grandfather can't coax her inside, though the sun has dropped below the oaks surrounding the old farmhouse. Does she listen for the owl at the top of the corn crib? Does she fear her mother won't return? The child does not complain. She does not push back the blonde hair that strays near her eyes. She sits still, clutching her brown bear as night's wings enfold the electric yard. Before, I remember not knowing we had anything big to fear. Languid days in the bliss of not imagining the night dreams that made you dread sleep. Your world fast becoming too much. All the little deaths I didn't see, my vision too wide or too narrow. Now all time breaks before and after. At the speed of tenderness, and this is with gratitude to Gil Fronsdal, who's a wonderful meditation teacher in California. Heal fast, Aunt Clary always said, knowing better than most what price tenderness, its lack. Her only child grown, not knowing who gave her up at birth. Her mother unwed, earthquake. In those days, you went away. Where? Only her sister and doctor knew. Becoming a mother, tender and tough enough to bear a child and give her away. Picture this mother and daughter 4 decades later, meeting face to face that first seismic time. A neutral room at the Blue Lagoon, one the mirror image of the other. Their widow's peaks, 2 women taking their own sweet time. Aftershocks that night as each slows toward sleep, suspended in a new sea of feeling. Once more, with no feeling. Everyone is talking about the new moon, blood moon, and another thing. Soon it will be time to go. So love the slab you stand on. Inside the body, a willow catches fire in this minute, in the next, in the unreal country of next year. That breath is past. Inside, like outside, space expands in the ambient anxiety of my night watch. After the surgery, I felt relieved to not have sex. No, I don't want to talk about it now. Maybe in the lifespan of an ant, of a mountain range heaved up from the sea, I'll find 2 sticks to rub together for fire. I slide my fingertips lightly from collarbone down breastbone to the hollow that separates what remains of cleavage. Soft slope to the right, taut ridge to the left. I search for margins of sensation, for endings and beginnings as feeling appears or disappears. Skin warm to touch, but numb as an empty bowl. Okay, I'm going to read 3 more. Just giving you a little heads up. How much more time? Inch by inch. And this too starts with an epigraph. As you reside in the house, so it must be a home in your mind. It's by the fabulous Grace Paley. I know this house, how sun filters in my study window in each season. Which crystal doorknob has come loose again? Which door scrapes the wooden floor? We intend to refinish before we leave this, our last house. How attached I've grown since we applied for community living, a place each will leave in a body bag, you likely before me, though no one knows for sure. This morning, I pour hot water into the Japanese teapot a friend gave me decades ago. Small work of art, crafted to hold heat, every inch meant for its job. Will you come too, little teapot? Your black iron knob shines from daily touch, concentric circles out to the lid's edge, echo down sloping sides. How mysterious the friendships that endure, traveling wherever I reside. We'll move to our last home soon, not a house like the one we're leaving. I'll measure furniture to fit 3 rooms, choose a few stones and shells carried home from Moose Mountain, Drake's Bay, and far countries I dream of seeing again. Will a daughter want the rocker my father made, or the one found in the hills of San Francisco the day my water broke? Which books shall I take? Give away? Oh, cherished space, mine's home. I know each thing will be released. Nothing can be hidden from the gods. Call them what you like. You'll find no place to hide from the gods you choose to embrace, outside or inside the body. Waiting out long, thin nights of interrupted sleep. One way or another, fear subsides. In time, you sink under and dream of mothering a mythic son destined to be murdered at mortal hands. Details of the dream's conversations fail to grace the pages of your notebook. No trace of blood or bone. what remains of each day? And why would you desire no end, abiding, immortal, never exposed? Okay, and I'm going to end with the last poem in the book. Old Riddle. Boiling water swirls in the pot. The egg drops from my spoon, and I turn down the heat, legs naked as Derrida's before my cat, who licks any bearskin he can reach. Would he gnaw on my bones underneath? In Sweden, my ancestors' descendants compost human remains, freeze a corpse in liquid nitrogen, shatter it into tiny pieces, nugget-sized, to mix with bacteria in biodegradable boxes to bury in the earth. How useful to continue in this way. Today, I watch the egg slow in its swirl, look a little deeper, and see the borders aren't fixed between my mother and the chicken, the egg, and me. Thank you, everybody, for coming. And I'm guessing Elizabeth's going to come back.
I am. I'm here. Thank you very much for your sharing your verse as well. To our audience members, if you have thoughtful comments that you'd like to leave, we are saving the chat transcript for the poets to read later. They were a little focused right now. They will be able to read your comments later. And now if you do have comments, questions rather, for the poets, we do have some time to answer them. If you don't, that's fine too. I will get us started though. For both of you, do either of you have a favorite poem format? Your probably not, Carol.
What did you guess?
Format. I like prose poems. And
What draws you to them?
I think because I used
Quantify.
in my early, before I started writing poetry, I was writing plays, theater, the absurd plays, and prose more. So I think there's something I'm just drawn more to a prosy approach. But I'm fascinated by the sonnet. I wonder, my friend Rebecca Starks is going to be teaching a sonnet course, and I'm going to sign up for it because I play with them, but they are usually truncated, or the prose poem sonnets. I want to sort of understand the traditional form.
And you've been writing poems for not an insignificant amount of time, but you still have much to learn.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
How do you go about, actually, Laura asks, could Sue speak more about how she came to construct the sonnet crown sequence?
Okay.
Tell a story.
I had been fascinated. I get into these family history and also history projects. And so I accumulate tons of information. And so I had gone through all these newspapers, and the story about Nettie was just overwhelming. And I love every morsel of it, every word. You know, I love these old-fashioned papers, the language they use. But I didn't know what to do with it. I couldn't control it. And I actually heard Carol Potter was reading with Carol Westberg. And Carol had a heroic crown. It was very different from what I do. It was funny. It was very witty. You know, it moved along. It was sort of she and her dog were driving around, and it was sort of circular. And I said, oh, that's what I can do for Nettie. And I went up to her and I said, Carol, I think I can write a heroic crown about this 700 reams of newspaper clippings. And she said, oh, I don't know. But I did. And she looked at it and gave me some advice. And so I think that it was something about finding the form that I was forced. You know, if you have a 14-line box, even if it's prose and not, rhythmic in a certain way, you have to cut. You have to decide what's going to go and what's going to come in. So
I wanted to ask, how do you choose a tempo for your poetry for either of you, but I suppose I keep asking questions, asking you to quantify your art. Not certain.
May I just break in for one moment and make a comment about what Sue just said? She just said she was not funny like Carol Potter. They're both wonderful poets. Sue is also very funny. She didn't choose to read something terribly humorous tonight, but she's got a great sense of humor. I want to also, and in terms of the form, that I would say I write free verse usually. I've written some sonnets, but I never like them very much. And I think a lot of people work well in forms, that forms give them something to push against. And what I discovered with this book is that, and you can't really see it, but there is a form, even though it's free verse, and it goes throughout the whole book in terms of the lineation. And so there's so many things to work with in poetry. But anyway, I'm just protesting about the no humor.
Do your poems ever teach you anything?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that one of the things they teach me is that there is always a surprise. If you just keep going, you don't know what's going to come up next. And that's half the fun of it, is not knowing where you're going and then winding up someplace was just totally unexpected. It's not always the case. Sometimes I write to the end, but.
No, I agree with what Carol said, that sometimes, especially if you're trying to fit into something that has an ending at a certain point, or a rhyme scheme or something, you forget about the content. You just are trying to fit it to the scheme, but it frees your subconscious up in some way. So.
Okay. Both of these books, many of these books are available from Gibson's Bookstore. Icelands from Carol is her new one, and Sue D. Burton is the author of Box, which she was reading from tonight. We are very happy to ship, or we are available for in-store browsing or curbside pickup. Last question I'm going to ask you before we leave you, dear sweet audience, is do either of you have a favorite word?
Oh.
Not just necessarily to you, a word where you're just like, yes, I adore this word, the sound and the taste of the syllables and the vowels. Mine is saponify.
I've never thought about that.
Me neither.
I mean, I often will track words I like and just collect them, and sometimes I'll use it as an exercise to help me get going if nothing's really up for me. And I have a list of words, but I can't pick a favorite. It's like picking a favorite child. I'm sorry.
What are some of the words you've collected recently that jumped out at you and said, I must keep that?
I don't have my list. I'm sorry. You're talking to somebody who's losing memory and worried about dementia, so I can't answer that one.
All right.
What came up for me was, but I was thinking, well, I don't know if it's a word or the concept with the word. I mean, lately I've been very drawn to crows, and I've always been drawn to crows and ravens. It's not the sound of the word so much, but just the whole visual image. I think that's why I was so taken with the Macbeth film. I mean, just those ravens swooping in, the whatever it is, I forget the grouping of ravens.
I know it's a murder of crows.
It's a murder of crows, and it's a conspiracy of ravens, and that was perfect for Macbeth anyway.
Yes.
Look forward to your next work on ravens. On corvids, are they called corvids? The group of
yes.
We look forward to your next work on corvids. Thank you very much to the two of you for joining us this evening, and thank you to our audience for joining us from home. As mentioned, these books are available from Gibson's Bookstore. We are saving this chat for everybody.
Good.
Thank you very much. Have a great evening.
You too. Thank you, Elizabeth.
Thank you, Elizabeth. It's been
Appreciate
great.
your
Thank you,
wonderful
everyone,
host.
for coming
Yes.
in your little boxes.
Thank you.
Night.